So we start with an introduction. I'm going to briefly introduce myself, but I think a few of you know me already. I see some familiar names. And most important, I'm going to present the session, the agenda for today. So a few words about me. So I'm Laurent Mathieu. My background is in cybersecurity, so including before the cloud era. I've been focusing a lot on AWS and AWS security in the past 5 years. I really find this topic very interesting. I mean, what we can do with this technology and automate the things compared to before the pre-cloud era. So yeah, I kind of felt in this AWS tech rabbit hole, and there's always something to learn there. The type of work I'm doing at the moment, I'm mostly working as a freelancer, as a consultant, as a freelancer, mostly for SMEs, in particular tech startups or SaaS providers. And interestingly, I found a lot of my current customers on the platform named AWS IQ. For those who are not familiar with it, it's a kind of marketplace made by AWS for AWS users, so the companies, to connect with AWS consultants, which are mostly freelancers like me. So it's a great marketplace to get new leads, and there are a lot of I found a lot of interesting projects working with this kind of customers. Next to that, I also spend a big part of my work working as a lecturer and an instructor for different online programs related to cybersecurity and or AWS. Because today I'm really in both domains, so I really enjoy that. I think it's very I got a lot of rewards from training people. I work a lot with people who are not from the tech world in the first place, so there are people who try to change their career path, and I found a lot of satisfaction in that. And yeah, today it's already my 6th webinar on Securzy, and I cannot still pronounce it. I'm not sure what's the right way. So obviously it's a bit easier for me compared to the first one, where I was very scared. And so the previous webinars were all about AWS security. So it's kind of a series. I think for those who are members, they are still available on replay. And just very briefly, we had the first one about building multi-tenant architectures in AWS. So if you're a SaaS provider, for example, then we had another one about performing security reviews on AWS environment. So what you have to do if you want to perform such a security review. We had one about infrastructure as code for security, still in AWS. Then I had a lot of demand for that one. We had a session about AWS essentials for security folks. So this was more like a 101 session for people who are security people like us who are kind of new in AWS. Then the last one we had, I think it was 1 or 2 months ago, was about network security in serverless architectures, still in AWS mostly. And today, the topic for today, we're going to talk about pen testing in AWS. The agenda for today, in a nutshell, we're going to talk about the AWS Acceptable Use Policy, or AUP, for pen testing, but basically tell us what we can do and what we cannot do and how, which is obviously always a very important topic before we start pen testing anything. Then there are things we cannot pen test in the cloud that are not necessary limits when you do pen tests on premises, right? So we're going to see what we can do beyond pen testing. So when you cannot pen test, what can you do instead to have the right level of security assurance? we're going to talk about some specific attack vectors that applies to AWS Cloud, but are not necessarily there on premises, for example. Then we're going to have some time for hands-on demo. So I'm going to go fast on the previous topic, so we have more demos going on with a particular use case I created for that. And I'm going to share some useful resources if you guys want to, get trained about pen testing on AWS or learn more by yourself. So that's the agenda for today. So without further ado, let's get started with the first topic. So let's talk about this important topic before we pen test anything. So what are the rules today if you want to start a pen test on your AWS account? So what are the regulations from AWS? Big question, because this thing has changed. We used to require to fill in a form for every single pen test we perform on AWS. This is no longer the case. So there is a pre-authorization for pen testing, which means basically if you pen test on a list of pre-approved services that can be found in the pen testing policy, then you don't need to have any prior pre-authorization. You don't need to ask for any authorization. You don't need to fill any form for AWS. As long as you stay within those services, they are the most common ones. So we're going to have a quick look at them at this list in a moment. If you perform some pen tests outside of the scope of the pre-approved services, then you need to submit a form to AWS that they need to approve. So nowadays, this is called like the simulated event request, and they have different flavors of this form depending. For example, if you want to do some DOS testing, it's a different form. There are some activities that will be prohibited in any case. So you cannot fill in the form for these ones. So they include mostly if you want to perform distributed denial of service, obviously, because you can put down the shared environment for the other customers as well, and we don't want that. And obviously, if you want to actively test against AWS infrastructure and services, so this is not allowed. Okay. That's why we're going to see what we can do instead to have enough security assurance for this part. This page is very, very interesting for this particular topic. So if I click on it, can you still see the screen? Yeah, I think it's being shared. Okay, very good. Yeah, so this is the main page for pen testing. All the other resources can be found here. And this is the pen testing policy. And as you can see, these ones are the things that you can test. So you got the most common services, right? You got EC2, you got RDS, etc., etc. Some stuff are prohibited, as I mentioned earlier. So they are mostly stuff related to DDoS, or indeed if you do some DNS related attacks on Route 53, because that's going to mess up with, that could mess up with other customers as well. And for particular events, you need to fill in this form. Okay. So as you see, there are different forms. Some events have different forms. So there can be some conditions where some kind of DDoS simulation would be okay, but not a full-scale one, definitely. And here we have, oh no, sorry, it's the same form. Yeah. Okay. So what the information I'm giving you in this presentation is like very high level. Obviously, you need to dig in more details here, but everything is contained here, and you have links to the underlying policies. As a side note, this is something that can change over the time, because again, in the past, we used to require authorization for everything. It's no longer the case, so things can change. So it's good to go back to this page sometimes.